Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and I am furious today. Right before bed last night, I'm laying down, I'm about to go to sleep, and I see a bunch of notifications pop up on my news feed showing Julian Assange in fear, screaming, getting dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Something we all knew that was going to happen eventually. We've seen stories over the past few weeks, especially talking about how he was inevitably going to be arrested in the next short while. But to see it happen, this is a slap in the face of truth, of freedom of speech, of freedom of the press. This is a guy who is a true journalist in every sense of the word. And what does it say when the government says you cannot have that speech, you cannot expose corruption, you cannot stand up against both sides, you cannot do what we don't tell you or give you permission to do? This is a great example of how enslaved we truly are. To watch him put in chains, it tells us a lot. And of course, Julian Assange has talked a bit about a kill switch regarding information that'll get leaked if he's arrested. And we're all waiting on that. I don't know, maybe it'll come out by the time this video is out. But the point is, there are some clues that point to why this happened now. We all know that Chelsea Manning has been in jail for a little while now again for refusing to testify. And Julian Assange is up on charges regarding Chelsea Manning. And as he was arrested, we will go into why we think this happened now in a moment. But first, I want to get into this article from Fox News, which says, Wikileaks founder Julian Assange arrested after Ecuador withdraws asylum. And as the article goes into, Wikileaks founder Julian Assange was charged Thursday with conspiracy to commit computer intrusion for aiding Chelsea Manning in the cracking of a password to a classified U.S. government computer in 2010. The U.S. Justice Department announced hours after Assange's arrest in London. Cutting away for a second, think about that. You can go to jail. You can go to jail for exposing people blowing up innocent people. Video footage showing people getting tortured and murdered in the streets, including children. Exposing that. Not the people that did it didn't go to jail. The people who exposed it go to jail. Think about that for a second, folks. Think of how disgusting and monolithic and disgusting, cancerous world we live in right now that this can happen. It's infuriating. But going back into the article, it says, Assange is accused of engaging in a conspiracy with Manning, the former U.S. Army analyst, in breaking a password stored on a U.S. Defense Department computer connected to a U.S. government computer network for classified documents and communications, the Justice Department said. Manning later transmitted a trove of classified government files to Assange, whose website posted the materials to a worldwide audience. Cracking the password allowed Manning to use a different username rather than her own, officials said. During the conspiracy, Manning and Assange engaged in real-time discussions regarding Manning's transmission of classified records to Assange, the Justice Department said. The discussions also reflect Assange actively encouraging Manning to provide more information. During an exchange, Manning told Assange that after this upload, that's all I really have got left, to which Assange replied, "Curious eyes never run dry in my experience." Assange faces a maximum of 5 years in prison if he's convicted of the charge. So again, you expose corruption, you expose murder, and again, analysts from the FBI, CIA, military, etc., all said that it didn't actually endanger any lives. It's been a talking point for a long time, but there's never been any evidence brought forward that proves that in any way this risked anyone's lives. Well, at the same time as this, we have to look at why Ecuador did this now and not earlier or later, or something like that. And the reason I believe, and there's a lot tying it to this, is about late February this year. The IMF loaned $4.2 billion in a financing deal to Ecuador. And this Reuters article, Ecuador inked $4.2 billion financing deal with IMF, Moreno, talks about it, where Ecuador has reached a $4.2 billion staff-level financing deal with the International Monetary Fund, President Lenin Moreno said on Wednesday, as the Andean country grapples with a large fiscal deficit and heavy external debt. The country will also relieve $6 billion in loans from multilateral institutions, including the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the CAF Andean Development Bank, Moreno said in a message broadcast on national television and radio. Ecuador's sovereign bond surged last week after the IMF confirmed it was engaged in formal talks with Moreno over a possible financial arrangement. Staff-level agreements between the IMF and member countries are subject to approval by the Washington-based lender's executive board. So let's talk about this cancer on the planet, John, the IMF, which we've gone into for years, this disgusting global governance structure that depends on people's debts, that basically buys up countries, much like China, where they loan money to countries that can't afford to pay it back, and then they take hold of the country's resources and basically hold them for ransom and eventually install global governing powers in those countries. John, this is an example of the organized crime we're dealing with the disgusting nature of these criminals that mass murder people, kill hundreds of millions of people worldwide, and then someone has the balls to talk about it, to expose it, to tell people, regardless of if it was Bush, Obama, or Trump, what is actually going on. So what do you think this IMF deal has to do with this whole situation of Assange being arrested?
Well, it comes at a point where it actually gets exposed. What's even more interesting is there was a bailout talks, Josh. They actually started, and I'm looking at a Wall Street Journal article from February 13th, and it says, Ecuador IMF launch formal talks on possible financial bailout. So that started on February 13th, and basically at February 21st, IMF Development Bank agreed to $10.2 billion bailout for Ecuador. So,
yeah, that's a whole financial package. It gets much bigger than the 4.2.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what it's all about. They used potentially this as leverage, the Americans, of course, because they are the ones that are running. They have the veto power at the IMF. They potentially have used this corruption of government, basically giving them money to hand over somebody that was rightfully trying to hide from the corrupt government structures that he has exposed, Julian Assange, of course. And this is very sickening, Josh, to watch this potentially have IMF collusion in here in order to actually get them to handle over Julian Assange. So that's John, what it smells a lot of.
This is a threat to every single individual who in any way has any inkling to provide truth to the populace. When we see this, I mean, going back years, we all saw Julian Assange putting on disguise and makeup with help from his mother, hopping on a scooter and riding off, avoiding his court hearing and going to the Ecuadorian embassy. We all saw this for years. The amount of evidence that he has put forward that has helped aid us in finding the truth and being the change, as is our motto here at WHAM, is huge. And when he goes to jail, that is a precedent that is over the top dangerous for all of us. That means every single one of us exposes information and we can end up like this. And even to a smaller scale, you could be a Max Egan, for example, and get your YouTube channel just completely taken down for daring to talk about New Zealand, for example. I mean, like, this is a huge, huge slap in the face of free speech, and anyone that sits down idly by and sees this happen are no better than the people in Nazi Germany leading into Hitler's rule, no better than the people who watched Lenin and then Stalin rise up in the USSR, no better than the people who sat idly by as Mao rose up, no better than the people who laughed and scoffed at the man who stood in front of the army tank in Tiananmen Square. This is absolutely monolithic, the size and scope of this organized crime, this cancerous entity, the global military-industrial complex, the IMF, which is working hand-in-hand with the military-industrial complex and the central banking system, and these governments around the world that aid it and do whatever they're told by these people. You aren't represented, folks. You are not represented. You are slaves, you're pawns to sacrifice for the king and the queen. The government doesn't do anything they don't personally benefit from. What do you think, John?
Well, I think this is just despicable, and what this shows is the extent that the government now is willing to go in order to stop people from leaking. You know, first of all, guys, what you got to understand is the government is supposedly being run by the people. This is what baffles me, that anything that the government is doing is secret whatsoever.
That's a collectivist mantra.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is, of course, the secrecy that has been built up around this government is just baffles me. And look at what's happening here in Canada with SNC-Lavalin, all of that stuff, where they say, yeah, they shouldn't have, exposed this because that's secret talks that the government shouldn't leak to the people. First of all, people actually voted them into power in the first place, so the people should know everything about every single little decision that these idiots are, making as politicians.
Well, think of the mental gymnastics here, John. Our privacy means absolutely nothing, and we should be spied on and watched 24/7 and completely controlled right to the slaughter. But someone talks about something secret within the ranks of the organized crime racket we call government, and oh no, we need to worship them and let them do things privately while completely eroding any remaining individual liberties we have.
Yeah, no, this is just disgusting, and if this doesn't give you goosebumps, it definitely gives me, because I know what they could do with other people when they do this with Julian Assange, which is really funny about Julian Assange. Everything that he has leaked, there has been nothing that has been, fake news like so many mainstream medias, and this
Absolutely
Russia
nothing.
and all this garbage.
Nothing.
Yeah, all this garbage that have come out of mainstream media. So this is just a purely sickening, and you want to vomit all over the government and everything that they do, because they are right in the 1984 right now, and
above and beyond.
If people aren't waking up to this now, we are going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble, and of course with another financial disaster coming, and that's what they leveraged here, it seems like, with Ecuador potentially to get the hold of Julian Assange. They actually extorted them with a IMF loan, which they're now potentially going to just falter on and then steal all of Ecuador's resources as the vulture loan sharks they are at the IMF. And this is just another step on completely stopping free speech, because this is really like, if people don't know the ramifications of what just happened at the Ecuadorian embassy and the apprehension of Julian Assange, because of course the United States is going to take him to the United States and put him away, so he is not going to be able to speak for 5 years, as they're saying. It's just a way to shut up people that actually are exposing every single disgusting, corrupt and terrible things that are done by governments on a worldwide scale. Now we are in a lot of trouble, because the government is supposed to be run by people, but it's actually not. It's a feudalist system. We have governments,
it's a criminal gang
around the world where, for example, in Spain, you can't protest. You're getting fined if you protest. You have to have a license to protest against the government, which is completely
and that's
insane.
similar in a lot of places. Yeah,
exactly. But this is what they're doing in order to slowly just strangle the free speech that is left in the world. And of course, we've seen big time with a lot of our friends, with a lot of people that we know that have been taken down, they've been removed, and so on, because of our viewpoints that are has nothing to do with the government.
Which just talks about individual freedom, people living their best life, people being happy and thriving in life. And we saw what sounded like Julian Assange saying the UK will resist while he was arrested. It's hard to make out. But with that said, we see also pictures of him giving thumbs up and everything in the back of a vehicle. I have a message to Wikileaks right now. They've been talking about a kill switch. Pull the kill switch. Bring it down. Now, if any time, is the time to do this.
Exactly.
Pull the cord on the Seth Rich story. Pull the cord on all the things that you guys have been holding on to for a while now in the case that this might happen. Just so for the purpose of being able to share other information, you've held some information back in order to prolong the freedom of Julian Assange and prolong the ability for WikiLeaks to publish material. Julian Assange is WikiLeaks. There are other people working on it, but Julian Assange is WikiLeaks. I don't agree with everything he says. Hell, I don't agree with everything anyone says. But the things that he has done for exposing the right and the left over the past 20 years, 30 years, is just so important for where we are at today as the government, central banks, etc. get desperate because they know they're going down, they know there's people waking up, and they know that we're building infrastructure on the blockchain, decentralized, etc., to erode their ability to enslave us. These people are vultures, like John said, that are feeding off the flesh of the public, and they want you dependent, they want you to be slaves, and they are winning as long as you watch this happen and go, oh no, that sure sucks. Speak out, do something, be loud, spread your message, spread your voice, reach as many people as possible. It is a domino effect. They're using a domino effect against us, so we use it right back at them. What do you think, John?
No, I think we just gotta double down on them. We gotta expose what they're doing, and we gotta come up with solutions. And that's why I'm having a big conference here in Winnipeg to expose to the very statist, majority of people here, what the solutions could be with implementing a blockchain to the government, and all of these different things to actually stop financial fraud. You can stop and expose everything that's happening within the government with an open ledger that they can see everything that's happening.
Them to just abolish
and people
it,
would actually, yeah, of course, but you would actually, with new technologies that are coming out, this corruption and everything that's going on with having it decentralized and open for the public, it's going to erode everything that they have built up with this massive government. Which we're reaching. It's so funny, Josh. We're reaching peak government at the same time as we're reaching peak, the debt, like the actual control that the currencies have on us, and we're seeing people moving more and more away from currencies, starting to really distrust the banks for everything that they've done. And we're starting, because that's the key here, it's trusting these institutions that have time and time again, that of course Wikileaks has exposed so many times, Josh, have exposed how corrupt and how little they really care about the general public whatsoever. So that means that we have to step up and start exposing. Everybody should just whistleblow everything that they know within the government, because it's time to take these governments down, because they're starting to try to go the completely opposite way of just strangle holding every single voice out there and stopping them from exposing them. But we need to just triple and quadruple down right now, because if we don't, I don't think there's going to be a lot, because we're looking at a financial crisis head on. Yeah. In the next couple of years here for sure, and with that, they're just going to put in even more government power if we don't have the solutions that we do have, and actually start using them, and decentralizing ourselves, moving away from the systems that are in control when it comes to the banking system, running our day-to-day transactions, controlling that. If it's the government and its ability to tax you to death and steal your money, and then using it on murdering people worldwide.
Yeah. And then paying off the interest on the debt.
Because it has exposed it. Yeah, of course. And that is a major one now. They're never going to pay back all the money that they printed, Josh. And that is what they're seeing. So they're going to double down on the system. And that's why they're trying to now, of course, imprison Julian Assange and throw him away, because he has been a thorn in the side to every government around the world for decades. Right?
Well, John, I mean, the free market always prevails. That's really what it's the people. Free market is the people. Creating their own reality.
Wow.
Yeah, and
is it?
Meanwhile, government, which they claim is about the people, it's always backwards. Everything is backwards in life. If the government that is supposed to be all about the people is about controlling the people, putting them into servitude, controlling them and leading them to the slaughter for the sake of the complex that runs it, the people at the top of that pyramid. I mean, when we look at the free market, the prevalence that can come with a private governance construct through something like a decentralized blockchain technology, where you replace the government, and people, without even having to agree with it, unwittingly realize that the government's been replaced one day, all at the same time as the giant complex of organized crime, the central banking system, the IMF, the governments around the world, try to unroll a different kind of cashless society that's centrally planned through the banking system and enslave people further. We must discern the two. But this is massive going forward. And John, we're going to close it off here, but there are more solutions than there are problems. There are so many solutions going down to food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Be independent, be responsible. Do not allow yourself to be controlled. Rule yourself, folks. Decentralize everything. Look to gold and silver, in my opinion, cryptocurrencies that have true fundamental value and are properly decentralized, especially in this day and age, the privacy-oriented ones. This is going to override whatever the state does because the state is inefficient. The only things they're good at is killing and stealing, and they're starting to not be very good at stealing actually nowadays either. So I think that we are slowly eroding their ability to control us, but we need to keep it up. We need to keep pushing forward. We cannot submit, because if we submit, we throw away our very humanity. We throw away every part of us that is important. The most important thing in life is being responsible. Self-responsibility is a hallmark of freedom itself. I've said it a million times. I'll say it a million times more, guys. It's about you as an individual and what you do next, not about what someone does for you or what someone says for you.
Josh.
Do not sit down, react, stand up, be loud. Let's create an evolution, not a revolution, an evolution. I think we will, John.
Exactly.
Final words?
No, we just got to get out there and start changing the way we behave, because the government is wanting us to behave another way and being in control of our lives. We just need to completely ignore what they're doing and just build our own things, get out of their control grids, and just start to, of course, educate the people around you about this, because that's the most important part, is to actually educate people about real freedom and real free markets, not the garbage. Like you have Ray Dalio coming out and say that capitalism has failed. Meanwhile, capitalism hasn't existed for the last 2 centuries.
Other than like garage sales and flea markets.
Yeah, but they're just so full of it, right? So what we got to do is just start ignoring these guys and not letting them control our lives, because we are worshiping somebody that's enslaving us, and it's really insane.
It's a false prophet. They're a shadow on the wall. Do not obey. That shadow only gains any form of momentum by your belief in that shadow. But that shadow is non-existence. It's just a figure in front of a light. Move it out of the way. Change the position of the light one way or another. That shadow isn't really existing. It's just that there are so many cheerleaders who believe in its existence like a religion and bow down to it. Like instead of a church, you got government buildings. Instead of televangelists, you got the mainstream media. Instead of a cross, you got a flag. Instead of the crusaders, you got the military. Instead of the organized crime henchmen, you got the police and different parts of the bureaucratic order that restrict your free will at every move. Instead of the Sunday schools, they got public schools, where they indoctrinate your children, destroy any bit of ambition that those children might have, and ensure that they're the next generation of slaves dependent on that system. We must break free. Do not obey. It comes down to you. It's easier than it looks. There's more solutions than problems, and you are the answer. You are the change you wish to see in this world. Thanks for going into this with us, John, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth. Be the change. Like what you see here, WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
you.